Welcome to EDU World Space.
Once again, welcome to a new problem. We're given a ball that's traveling. So this is the information that's given. So we have a ball that's traveling towards the right with a positive velocity of 40 meters per second. That's the ball traveling towards the right. And then it comes into contact with the bat. Okay. And once it comes into contact with the bat, it takes off upwards at an angle of 30 degrees. So this is the information that's given. The mass of the ball happens to be 0.145 kilograms. And the time it takes for the ball to have contact with the bat is 1.75 milliseconds, which we can change right away to seconds by multiplying by a reciprocal of 1,000. And that's going to give us 1.75 times 10 to the negative 3 seconds. So that's how much time the ball and the bat are in contact. Remember, the ball is coming from the left, moving towards the right, and then it gets hit such that it's going to have component velocities. So it has a velocity in the horizontal direction, okay, which you can call v final x, and it also has v final y. This one is the initial velocity, it's in the x, so v initial in the x is 40, and then v initial in the y happens to be 0 because the ball is not going up or down. So that's the information we're given. We're supposed to find we want to find the horizontal. So this is the average force. We want to find the horizontal component, the average force. And we also want to find the vertical component of the average force. So, we're calling it V average X and then V average Y. So looking at this problem, you always have to think about the ball in terms of X and Y. So the first thing we're going to do is to compute the initial momentum. This happens, when the ball is moving towards the right. V initial in the X happens to be 40 meters per second. So the initial momentum in the X is the mass of the ball times the initial velocity in the X. The mass of the ball happens to be 0.145 kilograms, and the initial velocity in the X, which is in the positive direction, is positive 40 meters per second. And so if you plug in those numbers, you get that the initial momentum in the X is 5.8 kilogram meters per second. That's the initial momentum in the X. Remember, our target is to get the vertical and the horizontal components of the average force. So if you think of it in terms of a diagram, what you're saying is that you have once the ball moves this way, and then there's a bat, the bat hits the ball that way, and so there's a force, there's an average force that's responsible for that within a specific time. That average force has two components. It has the X component, and it also has the Y component. So that's what we're trying to get. So we always have to think about the X and Y in this problem, but everything starts with the initial stuff. So this is the initial momentum in the X. Remember, the ball travels up until it comes to the bat. Okay, so when it hits the bat, it's gonna go up that way. So there are two components: the negative velocity, the negative final velocity in the X, and also the positive final velocity in the Y, because it's going upwards. If you look at the problem, they're telling us, that this ball It's traveling upwards. So if we want to get the final momentum, in the x, we'll need to take the mass times the final velocity in the x, which is going to be negative because it's pointing in the opposite direction. And so this is now where you use trigonometry. Remember, this angle here is 30 degrees. Okay, we can even call it theta for purposes of explanations. And then this is a velocity vector. This is the final velocity. This is the final velocity in the x. So you can see, using trigonometry, the final velocity in the x over the final velocity is the same as cosine of theta. So that means the final velocity in the x has to be the final velocity times cosine theta, but it's in that direction. So this is going to be negative final velocity theta. So simplifying this problem, we have m times the final velocity in the x, which is negative v final cosine of 30. And then this changes to plug in the numbers 0.145 kilograms. That's the mass times negative the final velocity. As you can recall, if you go back, the final velocity was given as we have to check. It was given as 52 meters per second. So don't forget about the final velocity. This final velocity right here, it happens to be v final equals to 52 meters per second. So going back, that's the number we're going to plug into the formula. So remember, there's a negative 52 meters per second times cosine of 30, okay, times cosine of 30, or we can see the whole thing as a unit. So we have the meters per second at the end. Okay, so we're going to have a meters per second at the end. So this times cosine of 30 meters per second, if you multiply those two numbers, you get negative 12. You get negative 6.53 kilogram meters per second. Meters per second. So we have two things, critical pieces of information that we've picked up so far. We have this baseball bat or baseball that's going up was hit by a bat. We have the initial final velocity in the x. We also have final velocity in the y. We've computed the initial momentum in the x. Going back on this page, you can see that the initial momentum in the x happens to be this one right here. Okay, 5.8 kilogram meters per second. That's positive. And then we also have the final momentum in the x. If you go back, it happens to be negative 6.53 kilogram meters per second. Negative 6.53 kilogram meters per second. So the impulse J, which is equivalent to the change in momentum, is the final momentum. This should be F, final. So final momentum minus initial momentum, which is the same as negative 6.53 kilogram meters per second minus 5.8 kilogram meters per second. And that's going to give us, remember, this is a process that's going to help us get the final, get the average velocity. If you put in those two numbers, you get negative 12.33 kilogram meters per second. And so this is a very helpful piece of information. We need the force. Another thing that happens is when the baseball gets hit like that, it's being hit by a specific force. That force has two components, the the horizontal component, which is negative, and the vertical component, which is positive, we're at a position to find the horizontal component, which is the same as the impulse in the x over the change in time. Remember, the change in time from the beginning was 1.75 times 10 to the negative 3. So this is the same as negative 12.33 kilogram meters per second over 1.75 times 10 to the negative 3 seconds. And this is going to give us a final answer for the horizontal force. F of x is the same as negative 50 newtons, approximately. That's the average. This is the average force in the horizontal. Okay, that's the average force in the horizontal. Average force in the horizontal. Okay. In the next page, we want to repeat the process so that we can get the same information this time for the y component. Remember, the ball is moving that way. The initial velocity in the x happens to be 40 meters per second, as you can recall. And then also, now we are kind of like focusing on the y component. But still, this is helpful pieces of information. Initial velocity in the x, 40 meters per second. Initial velocity in the y happens to be 0 meters per second because it's not moving up and down. The ball gets to a baseball bat, gets hit like that, and so it has a final velocity, negative final velocity in the x, and then it also has a negative final velocity in the y. Again, we're focusing on the y components. We want to find the initial momentum in the y. The initial momentum in the y happens to be the mass of the ball times the initial velocity in the y. So this is 0.145 kilogram times 0 meters per second. And that just gives us a momentum of 0 kilogram meters per second in the y direction. The other thing that happens is, once the ball is hit, we want to find the final momentum in the y, and that's just the mass times the final velocity in the y direction. It happens to be positive because upwards is positive. So this is 0.145 kilograms times the final velocity in the y, positive. Again, going back to our small diagram, you can recall if this is theta and this is V final and this is V final in the y, you can see that V final in the y has to be V final times sine of theta. Okay, so then this is what we're going to plug in right there. V final was, if you can recall, 52 meters per second, and then times sine of theta, which is 30, and this is meters per second. That gives us momentum in the y, which is 3.77 kilogram meters per second. And so now we can get the impulse in the y, which is the final momentum in the y minus initial momentum in the y, and that gives us the final momentum is 3.77 kilogram meters per second. Remember, the initial momentum in the y is 0 kilogram meters per second. And so now we have all the information we need to find the average force in the y. We go to the next page and you can see that if we have that, this would be F and this would be Fy and this would be negative Fx. So we're interested in finding that. So final force, average force, this is an average force. The final average force, or the average force in the y direction, is the same as the momentum in the y direction over the change in time. And we just found that the momentum in the y direction is 3.77 kilogram meters per second. And then we divide that by change in time. Change in time, we got that from the beginning, which is 1.75 times 10 to the negative 3. So this is 1.75 times 10 to the negative 3 seconds. And so, if you plug in the numbers, you get that for the y direction, you're going to end up with 2150 newtons. That's the average force in the y direction. Thanks for watching the video. Just to kind of like summarize, we wanted to find the average force in the x direction, which happens to be negative 7050 newtons, and the average force in the y direction, which happens to be 2150 newtons. The key is to break up the final momentum into two components, the y and the x, and also the initial momentum into two components, the y and the x, and then to use the impulse to get the average force. Remember, the F times delta t, which is the impulse, it helps us get the force because you solve for F. So F equals to the impulse over the change in time. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.